should do Russian accents the entirety of this video,
The
and then
whole
see if the
video.
congregation notices.
They won't. Hello. Okay. Well, all right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to Questions for Pastor. We're going to answer some questions. If you like this sort of thing, leave a like, comment, share the video. Leave your own questions on our website, fbcduke.org/questions. So anyways, our first question today is, Pastor, why would God create mankind or Lucifer knowing that man would sin and knowing that Jesus would have to die?
Well, there's a lot you could say about that, and most of it would be theoretical. Whenever we talk about an issue like this, you have to get into the will of God. That's ultimately what the question is, isn't it? It's you're trying to explain the will of God. Why did God do what He did? And we can make some guesses based off God's character and what we know about Him, but it really comes down to the similar type of question that we get about how do I know God's will for my life. And there's really only two types of God's will, which is His revealed will and His hidden will, or His sovereign will, whatever word you want to use there. And God's revealed will is just the Bible. That's it.
Right.
You're not going to find God's will in an alphabet soup one day. You're not going to be driving down the road and see, a sign that says Arizona 200 miles and say, God is asking me to go to Arizona. God doesn't do those types of things. God speaks to us through the Word. And then there's His hidden will, which is between Him and the other members of the Godhead. And He never reveals that to us. And so it's really as simple, that would be the short answer, as to say that if God wanted you to know why He created the earth, knowing what was going to happen, which is, I think, basically the question, He would have said. And so thanks for asking. We'll see you next time. No, there's more. You could theorize some things. We do know a couple of things about God's character. And for example, we know God is absolute just, absolute love, absolute, He is His attributes. He doesn't possess love. He is love. He doesn't possess justice. He is just. And it's in the essence of His being. And so knowing those things about God, why would God do something that He knew would end up causing some harm if He's totally just? And you really can't answer that question other than to say that God, being totally just, decided that would work out, that it would be okay, that it would end in justice. It would end for the good. God, being absolutely all good, would say, knowing all the possible circumstances of everything that could happen, God looks at the eons of time laid out before Him and decides, well, it's worth it. And that's really all you can say, is that it probably has to do a little bit with God's love. It probably has a little bit to do with God's desire to create and all of those things, but God is the one who weighs those things. We sometimes have, it's kind of like the comic book question, where if a superhero kills the bad guy, does that end in even more people getting hurt, kind of thing? Or those types of questions that are asked. You have a million possibilities, and how are you supposed to know that if I kill the bad guy, is it going to end up being worse off than if I left the bad guy there? Sometimes you have this conversation with, foreign policy. If we get rid of, this evil dictator over here that's ruling this country, that would make things worse, so we can't do that. And ultimately what we understand is when we have those types of questions, there's no way for us to know. When you make those type of judgment calls, you're thinking about something that will have an impact for hundreds of years. If you beat the bad guy, how do you know that's not going to make things worse? You can't ever answer that question. But God can.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing, is that God is able to see everything that could possibly happen. The infinite different circumstances, one where he makes humanity, one where he doesn't, one where he makes maybe only animals, one maybe where he makes only plant life. He can see every possible scenario, and ours is the one that he picked.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing that God is absolutely just and full of love and full of righteousness and goodness,
Mm-hmm.
I can know that this was the right choice. Even though it involves suffering, even though it involves, all of the pain, even though, I don't know what to say about Satan. God knew that he was going to do what he did before he did it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And God decided that it would be worth it to make him anyway. And that God knew that humanity was going to betray him. Mm-hmm. And he weighed all the possible cost. He weighed the cost of his own life. And he decided it would be worth it. That a world where Jesus suffers on a cross to save humanity is better than a world where humanity doesn't exist.
It kind of seems like we're getting, it kind of gets into the question of suffering. And ultimately, if we're talking about why would God do this if he knew that people would suffer and there would be suffering and it would be, terrible in this sense of the life that we experience for the most part. But I think Ravi Zacharias actually, before he passed, said something along the lines of love being the greatest thing that a person can experience. And one of the greatest things in life is love. And that you cannot have love without free will. And you can't have free will without suffering.
Oh yeah, and that's all part of it, it's definitely part of it. But as far as the question, why did God make us even though he knew that we would do this? Why did God make Satan even knowing that he would do that? I mean, you ultimately can't answer those questions other than to say that God, in his absolute knowledge, absolute goodness, absolute righteousness, absolute love, with total knowledge, saw what would happen and said, that's worth it.
Yeah.
It's worth the suffering. It's worth the betrayal. It's worth dying on a cross.
That we're worth it.
That humanity would be worth it. And
that you're worth it.
That you would be worth it. And so that's really, that's the answer is we could get into free will, and that's certainly part of the conversation. But the short answer would be, number one, we don't know. We can't know. If God wanted you to know, he would have told you. But a little bit maybe theoretical answer, because God didn't tell us, would be that we can just conclude that God decided it would be worth it. And so, I don't know how to answer it beyond that, to just say that God decided, obviously, because we're here, that suffering, and even the suffering of his son on the cross, is quite an interesting thing too, because the Bible makes it perfectly clear that Jesus was the acting force in creation, that he was the one who made everything. Without him, nothing was made. The Bible makes that really clear. And Jesus makes the universe and makes humanity knowing ahead of time what it was going to cost them. And why would somebody do that other than to say that they decided it was worth it?
Yeah.
So there you go.
If you've got a question you'd like answered, or you'd like to know a little more, maybe you want us to dig more into this topic, let us know. You can let us know on any of the numbers we've got on Facebook. Call any of us, text us, message us, drop a comment, let us know, and send your questions. So we'd love to hear from you. Bonus, am I the only one that kind of sees this whole Doctor Strange viewing all the possible options